Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Friday, the 18th of January, comes to you from London. And markets rising on trade hopes. So we're just seeing that improvement in stocks. Certainly, the dollar index continues to just wander into long-term bullish territory here. So we are seeing the dollar continuing its rise, although we do have some short-term targets hanging over us. We are still bullish above the cloud on the 60-minute chart. Looking at the euro is looking weaker against the dollar, and we're pulling back into that bearish territory. So still dollar strength is the theme. Against the yen, we're really seeing that dollar strength kicking in, and it normally shows up here first, the short-term chart. Looking pretty bullish. Sterling is sitting at 129, just coming off the top a little bit after a rise with all the political Brexit woes we're hearing. Sterling has held up pretty well, but it is still bearish on the medium and long-term charts. And the euro is also sterling against the euro looking stronger, but actually still has work to do on the long-term chart. So interesting to see there. Against the Swiss franc, we're seeing sterling is looking quite strong as well, and against the Aussie dollar, still in bullish territory short term. Bitcoin is down 0.4% this morning, just continuing to look bearish all around really. And the S&P 500 index last night was up 0.75%, and so it continues its rise. Still has a long way to go. We've got to get above that level that we saw in December to make a higher high to reverse this downtrend. So we can't call the recovery yet. The same with the Nasdaq. We've got to get above 7,070 really to on the Nasdaq 100. But we are looking bullish on the short-term chart. We do have new upside targets activated. So for the moment we are in recovery mode, but just watch for resistance. The Dow. Also looking relatively strong, and at the moment just short-term recovery. It was up 0.67% last night, and the Russell 2000 also continuing its short-term recovery. The future's up about 0.25% this morning on the S&P future. The Nasdaq E-mini up the same, so it does suggest the US market will continue its rise. Looking at the FTSE 100 this morning, we're up 0.75%. So we'll look at the individual stocks in a minute, but we are holding on to the short-term bullish mode there, and the FTSE 250 also just kicking higher. This just demonstrates really that the stocks are more rising on the US market strength than really the Brexit fears. So US stock markets are really still the driver, as always, for other regional stock markets. The DAX kicking to a new high, just breaking the last few days of resistance. So that's looking stronger this morning. Still bearish on the medium and long-term charts, of course. And the CAC Quarante up over 1%. Also breaking higher, so that's looking quite good as well. Japan was up nearly 1%. The Hang Seng up 1.25% and starting to wander into medium-term bullish territory. Not many markets are doing that. The Hang Seng is, so that's looking more promising. And the Chinese market not managing to do that yet, but still short-term bullish. But these long-term targets hanging over China are still our big concern. Looking at the Sensex, the Indian market also wandering into medium-term bullish territory. So we are seeing some improvements there in Asia that we're not seeing in other markets. The Aussie market not quite yet into medium-term bullish territory. Brent crude is up 0.5%, $61.50, so a short-term bullish. Remembering this is the quarter where Brent normally goes up. It's quite a strong quarter for Brent, for crude oil, so we shouldn't be surprised to see more rises there. And WTI also just pushing higher. US nat gas sitting at $3.33, just turning short-term bearish, so we are seeing a sell-off there. And gold also off 1/3%, sitting at this 1287.50 level. So what's interesting is that we do have this range now between about 1287 and 1295. That's showing up on the 60-minute point and figure chart. If we look here at the chart, we've got upside targets, one here not activated, and another one here just been activated this morning down to 1276. So we might see a pullback there. Gold, silver also looking just a little bit bearish in the short term. So seeing a little bit of a sell-off there. Gold actually also just now short-term bullish, but really choppy, so it's very hard to call this as a trend. US 10-year yields still in the doldrums, sitting at $2.70, 2.77%. That's the best we've seen in a couple of weeks. So we are just seeing a little bit of recovery there. Bond prices falling quite heavily on the back of those yields, so quite interesting there. Apple was up last night, so we're seeing that continuing, but some of the tech stocks still have further to run. This data all coming from either Thomson Reuters Icon or Metastock Zenith if you're a private user. The same system gives you global coverage, a really great system to use. Looking at the stocks themselves, here I'm using Yahoo Finance data. I could use any other data, of course, but Yahoo Finance is a nice free feed to use into Updata. So here we see the S&P 500 rising, seeing most of the US markets up, Europe up this morning, and Asia up except for India. So that's just showing on the World Indices screen. Here I've got my weekly chart, my 1% point figure, my daily chart, my 0.5% point figure, the daily chart with on-balance volume, and a relative strength to the Dow Jones set to the start of last year. So I can see, normalized, I can see how a stock has performed relative to the Dow. Taking a look at the tech stocks, the Nasdaq 100, we see Apple, they were up 0.6% overnight. Alphabet was up 0.83%. Amazon was up 0.56%. Just looking at the performers, Fastenal were up nearly 6%, Intuitive Surgical up 4%. So we are just starting to see some recoveries here. Stocks starting to poke through on their medium-term cloud charts, so that is quite bullish. Looking at the fallers, not as many fallers, just recognizing that stocks are going up. Express Scripts has been falling the last few days. Quite interesting because they're the one stock that's really held on to their bull trend, still outperforming the Dow over the past year by 33%. Taking a look at the Aussie market, just a quick look at the performers here. Afterpay Touch up 12%. Just ticking up there. That's looking like a recovery now. And if we look on the other end of the scale, Steadfast Group down 5%. Of course, you can click on any one of your stocks, so you can easily just rank and go for the stock you want. So if you have AMP, for example, you can go straight there and see this view very quickly. China, we saw Chinese stocks were mostly up. That's showing here in the screen. Only two stocks down in the Chinese 50. The Hang Seng, similar picture. It's Sunny Optical up 7%, 7.6%. If we look at the downside, there was only 5 stocks that were down. So quite key. And the Indian market, as we mentioned, was the less good performer. We have Reliance Industries up 4%, Wipro up 2%. We're seeing a lot of these integration stocks in India still holding their gains quite well. Sun Pharmaceutical down a massive 8%, Bharti Airtel down 6%. So we are still, that's what's dragging the Indian market down, just those poor performers at the end. And if we look at the Nikkei, we had some pretty big performance here. Toyota up 17%, but boy oh boy, they've had a terrible year last year. And if we look at the other end of the scale, just a handful of stocks down. Looking over to Europe, I've got my European screen here. Looking at the FTSE 100 index, these prices all coming in from Yahoo. And looking and they're 15-minute delayed prices, but all coming in from Yahoo. I've set them up on my screen to update every minute, so it's quite cool. Looking at the percentage changes, we see Ashted Group is the best performer, up 2.4%. Schroders up 2.35%, and we're just seeing here slight recovery in the relative. That's looking better for Schroders. The on-balance volume not really ticking higher. We had higher volume a few months ago at higher prices, so it's still not really volume driven, this rise. Taylor Wimpey, we saw a lot of house builders up here. Taylor Wimpey, they're looking better on the charts. Barrett Developments up as well. So we're seeing the prices coming in here this morning. Taking a look at the downside, we've got Easyjet down. Ryanair announcing a profits warning this morning. That's pushed Easyjet down 2.5% in sympathy. So we are seeing a lot of that going on. Vodafone, big stock here, down 0.5%. Struggling still to show any signs of positivity. Sage down 0.5%. They had a good start to the week. And are looking like a recovery situation, showing through on the relative as well. Down a massive 35% versus the Dow Jones index last year, seeing a bit of a recovery there. Looking at the FTSE 250, we've got Entertainment One as the best performer, up 5%. Not quite bullish yet on the medium-term chart. Spire Healthcare up. Thomas Cook, who had a terrible year last year, up 5%, but still the chart is dismal. Looking at the other end of the scale, we've got Sophos Group down 23%. That's a really big fall this morning. Ted Baker down 2%, so their woes continuing. And Mediclinic International down further. That chart looking terrible as well. Looking at the Euro Stock 600, we've got the best performances: Eurofins Scientific in Paris, they're up 6.8%. Telnet Group up 6%. Casino in Paris up 5%. So we're seeing some pretty big performances there. Looking at the other end of the scale, you've got Telecom Italia down a massive 9%. And here we see Ryanair down 2%. This is the Irish listed shares. Looking pretty weak on the chart, it must be said. We've still got these downside targets some 8.5% lower. We've underperformed the Dow Jones Index by 25-30% this year, so over the past year, so not looking good. Making new lows, making multi-year lows, 2-3 year lows. That's not great for the stock. That's it for today. Until Monday, happy charting. See you then.